Our ministry journey began in 1989 when we went on the road as evangelists, which we actually did for about 11 years. It was a ministry that God had called us to, that we had a passionate heart about, thought that we would always do, thought it would always be a part of our life. Never really dreamed or thought that we would make a change into pastoral ministry because it was such a passion. But sometimes God changes your heart, and sometimes God begins to speak to you in different directions.
One thing that I think about with evangelism, of course he and I started alone, and then along came the girls. And for me, the side of ministry changed because we had a travel trailer and it was preaching every night. But we made everything as normal as we could, waking up in a different town every week. And I think our last year of ministry as an evangelist, you were doing about 37 to 42 weeks of revival. And so our children knew nothing but church. And so I thought it was a great experience. A lot of people felt like it was taxing, and at times it was. But I loved it because it was just an adventure. So every time he'd crank the dually and we would hit that trailer and hit one of the roads leading to the next place, it was wonderful.
But I remember very vividly the time when God spoke to my heart and began to drop in my spirit about pastoral ministry. It was a very nerve-wracking moment because it was a road I had never walked down before. He spoke to me about a specific church, and that church was Plainview. And I remember we were in a revival, and God was just pouring into my heart and in my spirit so much about this church, I couldn't get it off of my mind. And I remember I contacted our state overseer at that time and told him of my interest. And it wasn't long after that we were elected as the pastor of that church. And so pastoral ministry began. We were there 4.5 years, had some tremendous years at Plainview.
Plainview was such a precious part of this journey. And I don't want to cry, but it was just a very good season. Lauren started school. Leslie was 2, and it was just the best people. They were willing to do anything to make the church go forward. And so with him, it was all new. But for me, finding my place as a pastor's wife was a little bit difficult because you want to navigate it and be personal in what the Lord's called you to do without picking up maybe what is expected of all pastors' wives. So that 4.5 years to me, it set us on a course of training to where I don't think that we could be here today had we not experienced that. And we love the people to this day. Sand Mountain will always have a part of us.
But I remember 4.5 years after we'd been in ministry there, and God was doing great things. Wonderful things were taking place. I remember very well on February of 2000, God began to stir my spirit again. And I knew that feeling because I'd already been there before. I knew what it felt like. He began to stir in my spirit, and he dropped in my heart about Valley View Church. I didn't really understand it all, didn't really know what it was all about, and just began to pray. And then the more I prayed, the stronger the impression became, the more God dropped it into my spirit. And the only thing that I knew to do in that moment was to follow the protocol of that time. I called our state overseer. I expressed to him my interest in the church. I told him that I don't know if the pastor is ready to leave the church, if it is open. I just know my heart. And I found out in that time that the pastor who was there was not leaving. And so I sort of began to question myself. Okay, Lord, I know what you put in my heart. I know what you put in my spirit, but the door's not open. But I shared with the overseer this. I told him, I said, if the door ever comes open, all I ask is that you remember me. And I remember very well, we were working youth camp in Springville, Alabama, a place we had been many, many times working. We were there this particular week. There were received a phone call from the overseer. He said, I went down to Valley View Church. I remember it was a year and a half later, 18 months later. He said, I went down to Valley View Church and presented your name, and you will be one of the names presented as pastor. It wasn't, but just a short time after that, we were elected as the pastor of the church, and a new adventure began.
One thing I would say about Sylacauga, back in 1987, which dates us, he and I were dating, and my sister and her husband were actually preaching revival here at this church. I think Brother Coulter was the pastor. And so we were dating, and he came down from Coleman to see me. And during the service, I missed him. I didn't know where he'd gone. Didn't know until probably several days later, because he didn't feel like he could share it right then. But he said that the Lord spoke to him in the altar and said, if you will crawl the perimeter of this hallway, I will heal your body.
I've had a physical issue in my body ever since I was born, where I walked with a limp. And I've prayed many times and believed many times for God to heal my body. And in that particular service, I'll never forget, God truly impressed me to crawl the perimeter of this building and that He would heal my body. And from that day even to this, I still have that issue to some degree. But yet God has touched my body in so many ways. But I still believe that the fulfillment of that miracle is to come. When we came to the church and ministry began, I began to see almost immediately, I felt like, why God's brought us here. I felt like there were changes that needed to take place in this church, changes that needed to take place in me, and those changes had to be done together. But those changes were for a reason, for a purpose of changing this city. From all the things we have witnessed, some of the things that, one of the big things I would like to see, that I feel like God placed in my heart over 20 years ago, would be to not only for this church to be changed, but this city to be changed by this church, as well as other churches. I'm not saying that we're the only one, but I believe that we are meant to be a key factor. And my heart is to see us be able to go beyond what is happening here solely, and to take what is happening here beyond this building out into a city that desperately needs God. I've found as a pastor some of the most, or the truest moments of real ministry is when you're with people in their hardest times of life.
For me personally, as a pastor's wife, and not just pastor's wife, but as a Christian, I've asked the Lord to let me feel people's hurt, even if it's unspoken and I pass them in the store. Let me feel their hurt and let me know how to love them like Jesus and to be His hands extended. And so to say over 20 years, the places that we've walked through with people, there's no way to document everything, but I know we've stood at the bedside of a lot of people, some seniors. We have had the most precious senior adults that's gone home to be with the Lord that actually paved the way for us to be where we are today.
When you talk about 20 years, you talk about the longevity, you talk about all these different things, but you see the babies born. You watch them grow into teenagers. You see them become adults. You do their wedding ceremonies. You dedicate their children. You see all these different steps of life come to pass, and how rewarding that is to me as a pastor.
There have been a lot of miracles in 20 years. I do remember one vividly. there was a lady in our church that had prayed for a baby. Was it like 7 years? And I think there was one that had prayed for 11 years, and it was just not going to be possible, according to man. And he had the privilege, not only were we there the day these children were born, these miracles, but he had the privilege to dedicate them.
You know, so many miracles have happened in over a 20-year period. It's hard to just sit and tell every miracle because we'd be here a while.
We had a lady come, and she was new to the church. She asked where she could sit. She sat by me. She was broken all during service. And then the next thing I knew, there was a manifestation, a demonic manifestation, and the Lord gloriously set her free. She came in with a very dark appearance on her face, very distraught. And when the Lord did it, it was almost like somebody took color and gave her color to her face. You were praying with her when it happened. And not only did she get saved, but she was sanctified and filled with the baptism of the Holy Spirit that day. And to this day, she's working in a large church in our denomination. She's helping other people.
We have a gentleman in our church that he was having some physical issues, and he went to the doctor. And they did testing on him, and when they came back with the test, they told him that he had cancer. And from what I had understood, the cancer was pretty prevalent in his body. And he came to us and he said, "Pastor, I want to ask you to pray and ask you to believe." And he asked the church specifically, and I remember this. But I also remember he came to you and I specifically and asked us as a couple to pray. And I remember that we all went to the Lord in prayer and we released our faith. And he had to go back a short time afterward, and they were going to do more testing to find out, how extensive the cancer was, to what degree it was in his body. When he went back for the testing, they did all of the tests, and they came back to him, and they said, "There's no cancer in your body." They could not find one trace of cancer in his body. He is still cancer-free today, and he's still here as a part of our church, worshiping with us every Sunday morning. The greatest miracle that can happen in any life is when a man, woman, boy, or girl is saved by the grace of God. Their sins are forgiven. Their life is changed. They may have one time been bound by sin and on their way to hell. But Jesus come into their heart with his saving grace and changed their life. And hell is no more longer a reality for them, but heaven becomes their future. And I just want to say, thank God for many salvations that have happened in this church in the last 20 years.
I believe that signs and wonders, manifestations of miracles are coming. It's happening every service. I've never in my life witnessed anybody receive the baptism in a Connect Group class, but that happened. On a Wednesday night in the women's class, one received the baptism. So what is it that the Lord is doing? It's a wild ride, and I'm so thankful to be a part of it. So thankful. One thing I'm so proud of, I'm proud of a lot of accomplishments that have been made and things that have happened. But I guess the greatest thing for me as a mom is that our children are serving the Lord. Not only just raised in the church and expectations due to their father's position. They've taken a different stance. I believe that they have the Father's heart. Lauren and Colin are doing an outstanding job as our student pastors. We know Colin came on nearly 4 years ago as an administrative assistant, and that is a lot of stuff, but I love where their generation is bringing a newness and coming alongside of us as middle-agers and even our senior adults and bringing this church into a different place. And Leslie with the worship, truly that's been something that transition has happened, and the worship is just amazing. And then there was Lane. In 2004, we became a family of 5. Currently, he serves on the worship team, doing an amazing job playing the guitar. He has a heart for the Lord, and we're excited to see what the future holds for him.
You know, one time, and I'll just be real, if you'd have told me 15 years ago I'd be here 20 years, I'd probably said it would never happen. Not because I didn't want to be here, because my heart's here. I just felt like that ministry would always be changing, because I remembered how it changed from evangelism to pastoral ministry. And then 4.5 years later, it changed from that pastoral ministry to this pastoral ministry. But I thank God that He has kept us in this place. And the full purpose of why He placed us here, much of it has been fulfilled. But I also feel that it's taken 20 years to bring us to the place where we are now. That we're on that launching pad of going into places with God that we've only dreamed of in the past. But we're here now.
Yeah. Over the last several years, God has sent amazing leaders to partner who have a heart for this house and who have caught the vision of the shepherd. We're so thankful, and we know that God has strategically lined up the right people. We're all in. This vision certainly is too big for us, but together we'll see it happen. I believe that the lost are coming in. The prodigals are coming home. Healings, signs, and wonders is what we're here for.
I know the vision that God put in my spirit 20 years ago. I've seen much of that vision fulfilled. But yet there's still much more that must be fulfilled. And I truly believe that the greatest days, the greatest moments, the greatest things that God has done in this church is not back here. It's not even right here. But it's up ahead of us. The most valuable lesson I've learned in the last 20 years is this: to trust God no matter what.